Thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to share with you 6 years worth of events photography experience to help you maximize the amount of money that you can charge, as well as get repeat bookings with your clients. And the things that I've learned have allowed me to repeatedly take photos for some of the UK's most exclusive events. It's also what's allowed me to slowly increase my rates over time, from a measly £30 an hour back when I was at university to over 5 times that amount nowadays. I'm currently back where my whole photography journey started. I'm staying in a lovely hostel in Cambridge, and that's because I'm shooting the Trinity College May ball tonight. It's a super fancy event, so before I take you with me and share all of my tips, I need to look the part. And we're all done. Right, let's go. And here we are in Trinity College. So the key idea is obviously to keep your client happy. Happy client means happy days for both you and your wallet. So today I'll focus on 3 main ways to keep your client happy. Firstly, the types of shots that you should always get at an event that you're shooting. Second, client management tips. You all know the anxious client that asks you a million questions. Here's how you should deal with them. And number 3, how to brand yourself and be professional. Okay, starting with the types of photographs that you should take at events. It's really useful to have a shot list because you can sort of stop panicking and worrying about whether or not you've got all the shots that are expected of you. And once you've sort of completed your shot list, you can relax a little bit, knowing that you've done the bare minimum of what's expected of you. And then you can start worrying about things like client management and branding and so on. So what are the types of shots that I recommend you get at every event? Before everyone arrives, I recommend putting on a wide angle lens and just taking a couple of photos of the venue. The client has probably spent a lot of money on the stage design, the overall venue design, and so on and so on. So grab a couple of those. Then once the people start coming, you can take your standard sort of posed group shots, right? You get small groups, large groups, whatever it is. Everyone's kind of aware that you're taking their picture, they're lining up for you, boom, easy peasy. I would say that this type of shot probably makes up 80% of my work whenever I shoot an event. That's the kind of bread and butter, right? You want to make sure that every guest that's in attendance has some kind of memory to take home with them. Once you've taken your establishing shots and your group shots, you can then move on to the sort of more artsy photos, the candids and so on, to spice up your portfolio so you can apply to more exciting gigs in the future. Candids are probably my favorite kind of photo to take at an event. I really like how you can freeze a moment and an emotion whenever you take a good candid. For this, you have to learn how to blend into the crowd, right? A lot of times when people spot the cameraman aiming the lens at them, they freeze up and they get all awkward. You want to avoid that because you want to capture a natural emotion, right? So one way to achieve that is by adding a bit of foreground. Not only are you adding a layer to your photo, which oftentimes makes for a better image, by sort of hiding behind, let's say, a tree trunk or another person's shoulder, you also make it harder to actually spot you, which helps a lot in capturing those natural emotions. A specific type of candid that I really recommend you do is whenever your client has spent a lot of money, let's say on kind of entertainment. It could be an acrobatics performance. I've seen magicians roam around at balls before. You want to make sure you get a good reaction shot to that entertainment, right? It's going to be a win-win for everyone. Your client's going to be happy because they see that the act that they spent money on was successful in entertaining the guests. The artists themselves will have a nice little image to maybe promote their work to future gigs, and you've done a good job taking a sick image. On the topic of things your client spent money on, if there's a sponsor for the event, if there's any sort of branded materials, I would definitely make sure to get some close-ups of that as well. Then lastly, this is an optional point that isn't always relevant, but you might want to put some time aside to do a dedicated portrait session of any sort of VIP guests. For example, 2 years ago, I shot the St. John's Maypole here in Cambridge, and just by pure chance, I ran into the famous YouTuber Ali Abdal, who I'm a big fan of. So I put on my prime lens and asked if he had like 5-10 minutes free in exchange for a nice couple of portraits. It was really nice. It was a great way to spend time with someone that I look up to, and he walked away with some nice shots of the evening. So win-win again. Okay, let's say you've taken all of the shots in your shot list. You can breathe for a bit, relax, knowing that you've done the bare minimum of your work. But this is not where your job ends. Sadly, you can't just show up and take your photos and leave. There's a whole magical world of client management that you need to become familiar with. There's a few things to keep in mind here to make sure you make the right people happy, to ensure that they book you again or introduce you to other potential clients in the future. One of the first things that I always try to do is making sure that I get some nice portraits and action shots of whoever booked me. At the end of the day, they're the main reason I'm getting paid today, so I better make sure they get some good content out of it. This includes their team as well. Whoever's running the event is usually too busy to fully enjoy themselves, pose for pictures and so on. So make sure you chat to them. Maybe at the end of the event you can take a survivor's photo of the team, like this one. Another really important thing about client management is the reassurance that you give them. One thing that I like to do whenever I arrive at the event before it has started is I find the person who hired me and I have a very quick meeting with them, right? Is there anything that you want me to focus on? Candid shots, any specific performers maybe? Was there anything that you spent loads of money on that I absolutely need to capture? And then I usually end our chat with something along the lines of, hey, I'm not going to message you unless there's a problem. So all you need to do is worry about running the event. You can completely forget about me and just look forward to some amazing photographs. The goal here is to make sure that your client sees you as a reliable photographer who can be left to their own devices and get the job done. The worst thing you can have is a super micromanagey, overbearing client that's like expecting to check in with you every half an hour. It's going to ruin your creative process and just piss everyone off. Okay, so that wraps up the whole client management chapter. On to the last point then. This is topic number 3, how to brand yourself and be perceived as more professional. So let me just start off by saying I'm not the biggest fan of the word professional. All it means by definition is that you're being paid for your services as opposed to it being a hobby or a pastime, I guess. And that means anytime you get paid to take any photograph, you're technically now a professional photographer. Now, as much as I don't love the word professional, you still have to use it and people need to view you as a professional. The reason being, they'll pay you more money. Having a website makes a huge difference, especially when sharing your portfolio with someone. It looks a lot better to have a website than a Dropbox or a Google Drive link. And honestly, based on speaking to clients and so on, this is one of the most important things, is make a website. Now, I know it's going to take some money, it's going to take some time, but there's a bunch of websites and services out there that make it pretty accessible these days to make your own website over the course of a weekend, for example. I recently started sharing my photography presets and I used Squarespace during the whole process to like set up the shop, get the payment systems and so on. So yeah, from my point of view, Squarespace is pretty good, but whatever you use, it doesn't really matter. And that's honestly the main thing. Having a website makes a huge difference in how much you can quote when a client reaches out to you. I personally use Squarespace and found it really easy to use and also relatively cheap. At first I thought it's a lot of money because it's about £12 a month, which works out at about, just under £150 a year. Now, while that is a lot of money in one go, my thought was as soon as I get one extra photography gig through my website, I've made that money back already. So I can kind of view it as a business investment. And finally, to be perceived as a professional is you got to act professional, get the basics right. Show up early, leave late, and really importantly, have a quick turnaround time. The worst thing a client can experience is paying hundreds of pounds for a photographer, having the event and knowing that the photographer has taken some really cool shots and they're just dying to see it, but now the photographer needs like 2 weeks to edit them, or you don't hear from them and you're not quite sure what's happening with the photos, and all the energy from the event has kind of dissipated. Oh, and then you get the image. That's not ideal. What you want to do is edit them as quick as possible, especially when it's the first time working with them. You want to almost impress them. I usually try to edit and upload everything by the next day, and it's just a really good way of making a good impression. The client and their guests are all keen to see your photos, and the worst thing you can have is a crowd of guests waiting to see the photos, and then they heckle your client, who then has to chase you. Everyone's stressed, everyone's unhappy. Just edit and upload them as quick as you can. Right, that wraps up about everything that I've learned in the past 6 years doing events photography. I hope this was somewhat useful. If it was, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you next time.